Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. What's up? I'm back in the building, son. You know, as you guys know, probably, we do have the St. Louis Rapid and Blitz going on right now, and we will have the Sinkfield Cup after, but right now, I went ahead and grabbed you the game between Hikaru Nakamura, Alireza Firouzja, taking out a round 2. Be 100%. Yep, round 2. So, yeah, it's a pretty exciting game, man. It's a really well-played game. You know, and it has a lot of stuff in there, man, that I can show you guys. So, man, of course, all my people that are coming from the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you. Kamusta na aking magkaibigan. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by, as always. Anybody who is coming from France, I will say bonjour to you. Comment ça va? Comment allez-vous? Bon petit déjeuner. Ça me fait plaisir de te voir, mes amis. I appreciate you guys very much. Merci beaucoup. Anybody who is coming from Iran, I will say salam. I think it's, let me check. Salam man Kelvin am. So I'm just trying to say I'm Kelvin, man. Appreciate you guys very much. Khayli mamnoon. I appreciate you guys for stopping by. But if you guys are ready to go, man, without any further ado, let's see what we got for this game. So we got the move knight to f3. So we have the rating opening starting off. And it almost always transposes into something else, you know, because ready is literally just knight to f3. So we do see the move d5, just making a claim in the center of the board. We got the move e3, knight to f6, and then we do have the move c4. So it's not as strange as sometimes you see c4 and there's nothing protecting it. You do have this bishop protecting. So, of course, you know, if the pawn takes here, you got the bishop taking here, and you're all good to go. We do see the move e6. We got b3. Bishop goes to e7. We got bishop to b2. We got castles by black. We got g3. And then we do have the move b6. And this is, I don't really watch Hikaru streams a lot, but I know that when I used to kind of watch his compilation videos, you know, he used to play this little double fianchetto thing like all the time. And he was just literally demolishing everybody with it. So Alireza Firouzja is a different animal when it comes to chess. So he was pretty much, you know, just demolishing like regular GMs with it and stuff like that. But, you know, I think the thing about it is it's more of kind of like a setup. And you can kind of get playable positions out of it. So that's kind of what he's looking for. He's not looking for like an insane advantage out of the opening. So black has an opportunity in this position. You guys guessed it, I know, to play c5. This is just a little bit more aggressive. It definitely gives black a little bit more. After you see the bishop coming to g2, you see knight to c6. And that is one of the main points of playing the move c5, because you don't really too much want to play knight to c6 outside of the pawn chain. A lot of the times in these types of positions, you want c5 to be used to, you know, try to, you know, make a claim in the center and break some stuff down. So knight would probably come to e5, knight takes e5, and then bishop takes e5. And this is a really, really nice position for black to have. But like I said, we didn't see that. We got the move b6. We see bishop to g2. We do see the move bishop to b7. And then we do have the move castles by white. And we have actually transposed out of a ready into an English opening Neo-Catalan defense. Declined. So, you know, as you guys can see, it does kind of have some similarities to the Catalan. You know, a lot of the times when you do play Catalan, you will be seeing this exact type of a setup. We just need d4. And, you know, maybe a queen to c2, knight b to d2, stuff like that. And you guys see the similarities. And you guessed it, c5. Like I said, man, you guys are making me proud, man. You guys are like, hey, c5 is going to come at some point when he's talking. If it's a d4 opening, a lot of times c5 does come. We do see the move queen to e2. We got queen over to c8, so we're doing our little queen movements. We got knight to c3. We got rook over to d8. We do see rook a to c1. We got knight to c6. So, I mean, everything is everything. I mean, both players have done exactly what they need to do. As you can see, it's like pretty deadlocked even. So, I mean, you know, both players kind of, you know, have similar ideas as far as these bishops. So, you know, neither side really just kind of has like a crazy advantage over the other. We do see the move d3. We got d4. Just trying to displace this knight a little bit. We got pawn takes d4, knight takes d4, knight takes, bishop takes g2 first. King takes g2, and then we do have pawn taking d4. There are pretty much two main moves that you can consider. There is knight to e4, which might be a little bit more forward, but you also do have knight going back to b1, and probably at some point rerouting it, something like that, which you'll actually see later in the game. The knight does come down to b1, and we do see queen to b7 with check, and this is the novelty of the game. So the novelty comes before the guess the move. But, you know, it's like, why not check, man? I mean, you got to check, place a check, unless you're going to get checkmated as a result of placing a check. You know, placing a check on somebody is not usually too bad. We do see king coming down to G1, and then we see the crazy move, Simon Williams approved H5. Harry the H-pawn says, put me in the game, coach. I want to play. So H5 is coming, and you will see it'll be some interesting stuff coming up. The knight does come to D2, and we do have the move H4. So we are full on attacking with this H-pawn. We're trying to say, hey, man, can we rip all these pawns from in front, move a rook over, place a queen, and then place checkmate? Okay, of course, that's not going to happen. Dreamcast scenario. But, like I'm saying, H-pawn is trying to do some damage. We do see pawn taking H4, which is actually the best move in the position. And I mean, on a good day, as Yasser Sherwin would say, maybe king to H1 and rook to G1, and we have some serious threats going on. We do see the move rook A to C8. We got the queen coming up to F3, offering a trade, because at the moment right now for white, you know, white is up an entire pawn. So, I mean, trades won't really be that bad for him, right? So we do see queen over to A6, just attacking this lonely little pawn over here. You got to be careful with that. I'll mention that in a minute. But like I said, we did see king to H1. We got the rook down to C5, and then we do see rook to G1. But since you do not have a light square bishop as white, you know, Firouzja said, hey, man, let me infiltrate on these light squares, bro. Because you can't really, you know, do anything about them around most of the board. So the queen does come down to G2, and it's like, bro, you know what? That's checkmate waiting to happen, man. Let's say like Firouzja just says, hey, man, I'm going to forget about my king and play like, I'm going to grab a pawn. You're not going to do that because it's checkmate. But yeah, we're hoping that, you know, maybe a player misses things. Some players miss stuff like that, man. But we do see knight to H5, and we are defending this pawn. And I mean, we're going to be playing H6 at some point. We do see the move A3. Bishop takes H4, and then we do see a rook C to F1. You could have also played knight to E4. That was a possibility. But black is very much in the driver's seat of this position at the present time. We do see the move G6. And the main thing that you have to think about as far as white is concerned is the fact that this bishop is not the best piece. It's kind of biting on a pawn that is heavily protected. And at some point, if E5 comes, I mean, this is not where you want this bishop to be. So when you do a Fee and Kettle situation, you really, really want the diagonal to be open. So if white still had their light square bishop, this would be a beautiful diagonal, right? We do see the move knight to E4. The bishop does come back to E7. We got knight to G3, knight takes G3, and then pawn takes G3. And you got to kind of be careful in this position, though, because it might seem like, wait a minute, can't I just get a pawn because I got a bishop and I got a queen? Well, the problem is you are going to get pinned if you do that. If you take bishop takes A3 like, yay, I got a pawn, right? No, you're not going to be celebrating, man, because you got rook takes F5, pawn takes F5, and then rook to A1. And then now you got, no, oh no, my queen, or oh no, my bishop in this case. So now you are deadly pinned, and you are completely losing the game. So be very careful when you grab pawns. Sometimes they are poisoned, but we do see the move B5 in the position. So this is a much better way to go about doing what I just mentioned. We got a counterattack at G4. So we're just going to trade rooks on F1, rook takes, and then rook takes. We got pawn taking C4, and then even though it might kind of seem like it's a little bit better to take with this so you don't like kind of break up your structure, you would pretty much be giving black a pass pawn. So you do kind of want to go B takes C4, and what I mentioned before is still live. If you do want to say, hey man, let me grab a pawn, you got rook coming to A1, and you are, that is not the greatest situation to be in. So we do have the move E5. We got bishop down to C1. Now, it is different in this situation simply because if the bishop takes here, now we can't slide that rook over. So it changes the situation drastically. But like I said, that bishop was absolutely horrible on the B2 square because now you have two whole pawns just completely blocking all of its action. So you have to try to do something to redirect. So like I said, we did see the move E5 and then bishop came down to C1. And we did not see bishop taking A3 in the game. What we actually saw, which is, you know, I mean, it's one of the best moves as well, but it has a very like logical thought process behind it. And that is the move rook over to B8. And when you're looking at this position, you have a rook as black. You have an open file on the B file. And so automatically, you know, you should start itching with like, you know, excitement when you see an open file and you see the ability for one of your rooks to get on that open file. So that is exactly what happened with Firouzja, but you know, he maintained his composure. He wasn't, you know, getting too excited, right? So we do see the move rook to B8, and you will see that this will be a very, very golden move a little bit later on in the game. So we do see the move queen goes to f3. And I mean, we kind of have some real threats, you know, on f7. I mean, this bishop is undefended. You know, if f7 falls, then I mean, g6 can be coming down. The rook can maybe lift up, stuff like that. So we have reached a point in the game. There is a very, very winning move in the position for Firouzja to play as black. If you want to go ahead and pause the video and see what move that is, go ahead and do so. Okay, so due to the particular setup of the king and the queen for white, you have the ability to basically completely immobilize white in their tracks. A lot of the times when you do have an opponent that's playing against you, right, and they are just way too active with one of their pieces, a lot of the times you want to try to trade that piece off, right? But at the same time as well, if you can pin the piece down, sometimes that can kind of do a very similar thing. So what Firouzja is thinking in this position is, hey man, your queen is a little bit too active, bro. So let's go ahead and kill that down, and you go, and he goes queen to b7. So essentially what that does is it protects f7 because now this queen is tied down to this king. So that was Firouzja's way of making sure that Hikaru was not able to do, you know, any damage on that f7 square, which would have been a little avalanche going on. So this is a very logical thing to be doing. So if you guessed, I'm going to pin this queen with b7, then you would be absolutely correct, and you're a gangster, and I applaud you. So the king does come up to g2, and then we say, man, let's get rid of your queen. This is a very, very nice position for black, and getting these queens off the board, it just, like, you know, maximizes, you know, black's position. So after the queen takes, we do see king taking. But it's weird because in this particular position, like, black is really, really winning, right? But it looks kind of like, man, I mean, everything looks kind of even. Like, we got even pawns, we got even pieces, but white is actually behind like one tempo in this particular situation. And black has a very real possibility of like throwing a lot of, you know, attacks on the board. So the first thing we do is pin this bishop down with rook to b1. And what we are trying to do is go ahead and win this pawn and give ourselves a passed pawn over here. The king does come down to e2. We got the move f5 because we got a majority in the center of the board. So we're trying to say, man, hey, you know what? I want to start getting a little pawn, you know, storm rolling, right? So pawn takes f5, and then the king comes over to d2. And it's now that we actually snapped that pawn off the board. So now black has just won a pawn. And this next move might look kind of strange to you. c5. You're thinking like, wait a minute, hold on. Like, why am I just giving away that pawn? Well, the thing about it is sometimes you get in positions where you really kind of have to use one of your pawns or one of your pieces to deflect another piece. Because right now, if you notice, this rook is undefended, this bishop is pinned, and you are very, very immobilized as white. So with Hikaru thinking about that, he's thinking, I got to try to do something to unravel myself from this pinned position. So the way that he figures to do that, which is the best move in the position, there's about two moves that you can make in this position, but this is one of the best ones, is c5. And what you're trying to do is get this bishop to bite back that way so you can free this rook up, because you would really like to take f5. But you can't do it with this bishop because you are going to be looking at check if you move the rook off of that rank. So Firouzja takes, bishop takes c5, and then now you're able to take on f5. You got the bishop up to d6. You got the king over to c2 attacking that rook. The rook just drops back and says, hey, man, I did enough on that square. So we see the move h4. So, I mean, you know, things are like not crazy bad for white, but you know, we're kind of on the fence here with it, right? So the rook does come over to c7 with check, and this is the proper idea for Firouzja. King going down to d1 does allow the rook to come over to c3, and there really isn't a good way to defend this pawn. And so we do see a counterattack by Hikaru. Rook goes to f6. We see the bishop down to a3. And you kind of have to do something. I mean, you don't generally want to do this because you're going to be looking at check first. And then after the king moves somewhere, then take this. And you got two monster pawns in the center of the board. So we see bishop going up to g7, just clearing itself out of the way. The rook does take on d3 check. Like I said, there wasn't really a good way to protect that pawn. The king goes up to e2. We see rook over to h3. We got rook over to g6 with check. And Hikaru at this point, he only has like maybe about 10 to 15 seconds. So, I mean, he's playing like hyper bullet at this point. So, you know, you don't really have the ability to calculate when you're down that low. So, the king goes down to f7. The rook goes to f6 with check. We got the king going over to g7. We got the king sliding over to f2. And unfortunately, this allows a really monster move, bishop up to e7. And you have some very severe problems here. You cannot avoid a bishop trade, which is not what you want to do being down 2 pawns. So it is in this position that Hikaru does resign the game. Just to show you guys a possible variation, this is like one of the absolute best ways to play. Just do a counter attack, right? So the rook would probably slide over to e6. After the bishop took, the pawn takes, you would be looking at rook to e3. And so you have 3 pawns as black against 1 pawn. And you can always try to swing over here and attack this pawn. But the problem is that's going to allow the king to come forward and then attack your own pawn. So you're going to be in a situation where it's a king and a rook versus a king, a rook, and 2 pawns, which this is the correct setup for that. You're basically going to be using, you know, the king if you can, but just basically crawling these pawns forward in this type of a fashion. And you are going to be in a position where this rook basically becomes useless. And that is just the absolute end of the game. So I appreciate everybody very much for stopping by. Maraming salamat aking makaibigan. Merci beaucoup. Khayli mamnoon. And I will see you guys next time.